The rain hammered against the windows of Amara's cottage like desperate fingers clawing for entry. Lightning split the dark sky, illuminating her beautiful mahogany face as she peered through the curtains at the violent storm raging outside. Her full lips curved into a frown of concern as she watched the ancient oak trees bend and sway in the howling wind. Amara Okafor had always been known throughout the village for her extraordinary beauty and even more extraordinary kindness. At 28, she possessed the kind of radiant dark skin that seemed to glow from within, high cheekbones that could have been carved by master sculptors, and eyes so warm and compassionate that strangers often found themselves sharing their deepest troubles with her. Her hair fell in natural coils around her shoulders, and tonight she wore a simple cream-colored dress that complemented her graceful figure. She had moved to this isolated cottage on the outskirts of Mbale village 6 months ago, seeking solitude after her mother's death. The locals had warned her about living alone so far from town, but Amara cherished the peace and quiet. She worked as a nurse at the district hospital and spent her evenings reading, tending to her garden, and finding solace in the silence that surrounded her small sanctuary. The storm had been brewing all day, and now it unleashed its full fury. The electricity had gone out an hour ago, leaving her with only the warm glow of candles and the crackling fire in her hearth. She had just settled into her favorite armchair with a cup of tea when the sound reached her ears, a sound that made her blood run cold. Knock, knock, knock. The pounding on her front door was barely audible above the storm's roar, but it was insistent, urgent. Amara set down her tea with trembling hands, her heart beginning to race. Who could possibly be out in this weather? The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, and the road to her cottage was treacherous even in good conditions. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came again, more desperate this time. Amara rose slowly from her chair, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She approached the door cautiously, her hand hovering over the heavy iron lock her father had installed when she first moved in. "Who's there?" she called out, her melodious voice barely carrying over the storm. "Please," came a man's voice from the other side, deep and resonant but strained with what sounded like exhaustion and pain. "I'm hurt. My car broke down on the road. I've been walking for hours. Please, I just need shelter until the storm passes." Amara's compassionate nature warred with her instincts. Every fiber of her being told her to help this stranger, but something deep in her gut whispered warnings. She pressed her ear to the door, listening to the man's labored breathing and the sound of him stumbling against the wooden frame. "I'm bleeding," the voice continued, weaker now. "Please, sister, I won't harm you. I just need help." The word sister touched something deep in Amara's heart. In their culture, it was a term of respect and kinship, and hearing it from this desperate stranger melted her resolve. She had taken an oath as a nurse to help those in need, and here was someone who clearly required assistance. Her slender fingers worked the lock, and she slowly opened the door, leaving the chain latch engaged so she could peer through the gap. What she saw made her gasp and immediately fumble with the chain. Through the narrow opening, Amara saw the most striking man she had ever encountered. Despite being soaked to the bone and clearly in distress, he possessed a magnetism that was almost supernatural. His skin was a rich, dark ebony that seemed to absorb the candlelight from within her home, and his face was a masterpiece of masculine beauty, sharp jawline, full lips, and eyes so dark they appeared almost black in the dim light. He was tall and powerfully built, his wet shirt clinging to a muscular chest and broad shoulders. Even in his bedraggled state, there was something regal about his bearing, but it was the blood that made her decision for her. A dark stain spread across his left shoulder, and his right hand was pressed against his side where more blood seeped between his fingers. His breathing was shallow, and he swayed slightly as he stood on her doorstep. "Oh my God," Amara whispered, immediately unlatching the chain and throwing the door wide open. "Come in, quickly." The stranger stumbled across the threshold, leaving muddy footprints and drops of blood on her pristine floor. Up close, his beauty was even more overwhelming. But Amara forced herself to focus on his injuries. The nurse in her took over, pushing aside any other thoughts. "Sit down," she commanded, guiding him to the sofa near the fireplace. Let me look at those wounds. Thank you, he said, his voice like warm honey despite his obvious pain. I'm Marcus Deng. I was driving to visit family in Kampala when the storm hit. A tree fell across the road, and when I swerved to avoid it, my car went into a ditch. I cut myself on the broken glass getting out. Amara hurried to her bathroom to gather medical supplies, bandages, antiseptic, clean cloths. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her mind raced. Something about Marcus's story didn't quite add up. The main road to Kampala was 15 miles from her cottage, and there were several villages between here and there. Why had he walked so far to her isolated home instead of seeking help elsewhere? When she returned to the living room, Marcus had removed his shirt, revealing a torso that looked like it had been carved from the finest obsidian. The candlelight danced across his skin, highlighting every perfectly defined muscle. Despite her medical training, Amara felt her cheeks grow warm at the sight. The shoulder wound looks deep, she said professionally, kneeling beside him with her supplies. This might hurt. As she began cleaning the wound, Marcus watched her intently. His dark eyes never left her face, studying every detail of her features, with an intensity that made her skin prickle. When she leaned closer to examine the cut, she could feel his breath on her neck, warm and slightly sweet, with an underlying scent she couldn't identify. You're very beautiful, he said softly, his voice hypnotic in the flickering candlelight. And very kind. Not many people would let a stranger into their home on a night like this. Amara's hands stilled for a moment. I'm a nurse, she replied, focusing on her work to avoid his penetrating gaze. I've taken an oath to help people. Even dangerous people? The question was asked so quietly she almost missed it. What? She looked up to find him smiling, but there was something in that smile that made her stomach clench with unease. Nothing, Marcus said, the smile becoming warmer, more charming. I just meant that you're taking a risk letting me in. You don't know anything about me. I know you're hurt and need help, Amara replied, returning to her work. But his words had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. She began to notice things she had missed before. The way his eyes seemed to glow in the candlelight, how his wounds, while bloody, didn't seem as deep as they had initially appeared. And that sweet scent on his breath was growing stronger, almost cloying. As she bandaged his shoulder, Marcus began to talk, his voice weaving stories of his life, his travels, his family. He was charming, eloquent, and incredibly handsome, but with each passing moment, Amara's unease grew. There was something predatory in the way he looked at her, something that made her feel like prey being sized up by a hunter. When she finished treating his wounds, Marcus caught her hand in his grip firm and warm. Thank you, Amara, he said, and she realized with a start that she had never told him her name. How do you know my name? Amara asked, trying to keep her voice steady as she slowly pulled her hand from Marcus's grip. The warmth of his touch lingered on her skin like a brand, and she found herself taking an unconscious step backward. Marcus's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too white, too sharp in the candlelight. You told me, he said smoothly, but there was something in his tone that made her skin crawl. When you introduced yourself. No, Amara said firmly, her nursing training kicking in as she began to assess the situation with clinical detachment. I never told you my name. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the continued fury of the storm outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating Marcus's face in stark relief, and for just a moment Amara could have sworn she saw something inhuman flicker across his features. You're right, Marcus said finally, rising from the sofa with fluid grace. Despite his supposed injuries, he moved like a predator, silent, controlled, dangerous. I already knew your name, just like I know you live alone out here 3 miles from the nearest neighbor. Just like I know you work late shifts at the hospital and usually come home around midnight. Just like I know you have no family left since your mother died. Terror crashed over Amara like a cold wave. She backed toward the kitchen, her mind racing as she tried to process what was happening. You've been watching me, she whispered, her beautiful features contorting with fear and disgust. For weeks, Marcus confirmed, his voice losing all pretense of pain or gratitude. Now it was, cold, calculating, hungry. You're even more beautiful up close than you were through my binoculars, so kind, so trusting, so perfectly naive. The bandages she had so carefully applied were falling away from his shoulder, revealing skin that was completely unmarked. There had never been any wounds. The blood had been fake, part of an elaborate deception to gain entry to her home. "What do you want?" Amara managed to ask, though her throat felt tight with fear. Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "What do you think I want, beautiful Amara? You let me into your home, tended to my fake wounds, showed me such tender care. Now it's time for you to show me other kinds of tenderness." He began moving toward her, his movements now openly predatory. The storm outside seemed to intensify, as if nature itself sensed the evil that had been unleashed in the small cottage. Shadows danced wildly on the walls and the candles flickered ominously. "Stay away from me," Amara commanded, her voice finding strength despite her terror. She grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, holding it between them with shaking hands. "Oh, Amara," Marcus purred, seeming amused rather than threatened by the blade. "You really think that little knife is going to stop me? I've been planning this for so long. Do you know how hard it was to wait? To watch you through your windows night after night, to see you in that hospital uniform? To imagine all the things I was going to do to you?" His words painted horrifying pictures in her mind, and Amara realized, with crystalline clarity, that this man, this monster, had been stalking her for weeks. He had chosen this night, this storm, knowing she would be isolated and vulnerable. The fake injuries, the desperate act, the appeal to her compassionate nature, it had all been a carefully orchestrated trap. "You're sick," she said, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "You need help." "The only help I need," Marcus said, lunging forward with inhuman speed, "is for you to stop fighting what's going to happen." Amara slashed wildly with the knife, catching him across the chest. He hissed in pain and anger, dark blood blooming across his skin. This wound was real. But instead of deterring him, it only seemed to enrage him further. "You shouldn't have done that," he snarled, his handsome features twisting into something monstrous. He backhanded her across the face with brutal force, sending her crashing into the kitchen cabinets. Stars exploded behind her eyes and she tasted blood in her mouth. Through her dazed vision, she saw Marcus advancing on her, his dark eyes blazing with fury and twisted desire. The storm outside reached a crescendo, and in that moment, Amara realized that if she didn't act now, she would never see another sunrise. Blood trickled from the corner of Amara's mouth as she struggled to her feet, using the kitchen counter for support. Her head throbbed from Marcus's vicious blow, but adrenaline and pure survival instinct kept her moving. The knife had skittered across the floor when she fell, now lying just out of reach near the refrigerator. "Look what you made me do," Marcus said, pressing his hand against the cut on his chest. His voice carried a twisted note of disappointment, as if she had somehow failed to meet his expectations. "I wanted this to be gentle, romantic even. We could have had something beautiful together, Amara." "You're insane," she spat, wiping blood from her lip with the back of her hand. Even battered and terrified, her natural grace shone through. Her dark eyes blazed with defiance despite the fear coursing through her veins. Marcus smiled that horrible, predatory smile again. "Maybe, but insane or not, you're still going to give me what I want. We have all night, and no one can hear you scream over this storm." As if to emphasize his point, thunder crashed overhead, shaking the small cottage to its foundations. The candles flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows that made Marcus look even more demonic. Rain lashed against the windows with renewed fury, and somewhere in the distance a tree creaked ominously before crashing to the ground. Amara's mind raced, cataloging every detail of her surroundings, every possible escape route or weapon. The front door was behind Marcus, blocked by his imposing frame. The back door was through the living room, but he could easily catch her before she reached it. Her cell phone was on the coffee table, useless anyway, as the storm had knocked out the cell towers hours ago. "You know what I love most about you?" Marcus continued, beginning to circle her like a wolf stalking wounded prey. Your compassion, the way you couldn't resist helping a stranger in need. It's what makes you so perfect, so pure, and it's going to make breaking you so much sweeter. You won't break me, Amara said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. I'm stronger than you think. We'll see about that. Marcus lunged forward again, but this time Amara was ready. She grabbed a cast-iron skillet from the stove and swung it with all her strength, connecting with his temple with a satisfying crack. He staggered backward, cursing, dark blood streaming down the side of his face. You little, he snarled, but Amara was already moving. She dove for the knife, her fingers closing around the handle just as Marcus's foot stomped down inches from her head. She rolled away, slashing upward, catching him across the thigh. He roared in pain and rage, stumbling backward. I'm going to make you pay for every cut, he promised, his handsome features now twisted with fury and bloodlust. I'm going to take my time with you. Amara scrambled to her feet, the knife clutched in her trembling hand. She was breathing hard, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The adrenaline was keeping her moving, but she could feel exhaustion creeping in at the edges of her consciousness. Marcus was bleeding from multiple wounds now, but they only seemed to make him more dangerous, more desperate. He moved differently too. She noticed his injuries were healing faster than they should, the cuts already beginning to close. What kind of monster was he? What are you? She whispered, backing toward the living room. Does it matter? Marcus replied, following her slowly, savoring her fear. I'm your worst nightmare, beautiful Amara. I'm the monster your mother warned you about, the thing that goes bump in the night. The living room offered more space to maneuver, but also more places for him to corner her. Amara's eyes darted around the room, taking inventory. The fireplace poker, too far away. The heavy ceramic vase on the mantel, possible if she could reach it. The front door, still her best bet for escape, if she could get past him. Why me? She asked, trying to keep him talking while she planned her next move. Why did you choose me? Marcus paused, tilting his head as if considering the question. Because you're everything I've ever wanted. Beautiful, kind, innocent. And because you live alone out here where no one can hear you scream. Where no one will find your body for days, maybe weeks. The casual way he spoke about her death chilled her to the bone. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. This was calculated, premeditated evil. He had been planning this for weeks, studying her routines, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The storm wasn't an accident, she realized aloud. You planned this. You knew I'd be alone, that help wouldn't come. Very good, Marcus said, applauding slowly. I've been watching the weather reports for days. This storm was perfect, isolated, violent, long-lasting. No one will venture out until it passes, and by then, he shrugged eloquently. Amara's grip tightened on the knife. She had one advantage. She knew this house intimately. Every creaking board, every shadow, every hiding place. If she could just reach the back door. But as she took a step backward, her foot caught on the edge of the coffee table. She stumbled, her arms windmilling as she tried to regain her balance. The knife flew from her hand, clattering across the floor and disappearing into the shadows. Marcus's laugh filled the room. Rich and triumphant. End of the line, beautiful. Weaponless and trapped, Amara felt despair wash over her for a moment. But then she remembered her mother's words, spoken during one of their last conversations. A woman's greatest weapon is her mind, my daughter. When all else fails, think. Your way out. As Marcus advanced on her, his eyes gleaming with anticipation, Amara forced herself to think. The knife was gone, the doors were blocked, but she wasn't defeated yet. Her gaze fell on the oil lamp sitting on the side table, the same lamp her grandmother had brought from Nigeria decades ago. You know what's going to happen now, Marcus said, his voice thick with twisted desire. Stop fighting and maybe I'll make it quick. Never, Amara whispered, and in one fluid motion she grabbed the oil lamp and hurled it at the fireplace. The lamp shattered against the stone hearth, sending burning oil splashing across the wooden floor. Flames erupted instantly, spreading with hungry enthusiasm across the dry boards. The fire created a barrier between them, buying her precious seconds. Marcus cursed, momentarily blinded by the sudden flare of light. "You crazy woman! You'll burn us both alive." "Better than what you had planned," Amara shot back, using the distraction to sprint toward the back door. She could hear Marcus crashing through the flames behind her, could smell the acrid scent of burning wood mixing with something else, something that smelled like sulfur and decay. The fire spread faster than natural flames should, as if fed by some supernatural force. Her fingers fumbled with the back door lock, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the key. Behind her, she could hear Marcus's heavy breathing, could feel his presence like a physical weight pressing against her back. The lock clicked open just as his hand slammed against the door beside her head. She yanked it open and plunged into the storm. The wind and rain hit her like a physical blow, instantly soaking through her thin dress and chilling her to the bone. Lightning illuminated the landscape in stark, terrifying detail. Twisted trees bending in the wind, flooded ground, debris flying through the air like missiles. "Amara!" Marcus's voice roared behind her, barely audible over the storm's fury. "You can't escape me. I know these woods better than you do." She ran blindly into the night, her bare feet slipping and sliding on the muddy ground. Branches tore at her dress and hair, and more than once she stumbled and fell, only to scramble back to her feet and keep running. Behind her she could see the orange glow of her burning cottage, and she felt a moment of grief for the sanctuary she was losing. But she was alive, and that was what mattered. The forest was a nightmare maze of fallen trees and flooded gullies. More than once, Amara found herself waist-deep in rushing water, fighting to keep from being swept away. The cold was beginning to affect her thinking, making her movements sluggish and her thoughts fuzzy. She could hear Marcus crashing through, the underbrush behind her, his voice calling out with false sweetness. "Amara, come back, you'll die out here, let me keep you warm." His words spurred her on, giving her strength when she thought she had none left. She pressed deeper into the forest, following a path she remembered from her childhood visits to her grandmother's house. If she could just reach the old woman's cabin, she might find shelter, or at least a place to hide until dawn. The path was treacherous in the storm, overgrown and slippery, but it was her only hope. Thunder crashed overhead, and in the brief flashes of lightning, she caught glimpses of Marcus behind her, his shirt torn and bloody, his handsome face twisted with rage and determination. He was gaining on her. Amara's lungs burned and her legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to keep moving. Just ahead, she could see the familiar outline of her grandmother's abandoned cabin, its tin roof gleaming in the lightning. She had spent summers here as a child, listening to stories of ancestors and spirits, learning the old ways that her mother had tried to forget. She burst through the cabin door just as Marcus emerged from the tree line. The old structure was filled with cobwebs and dust, but it was solid. More importantly, she remembered something her grandmother had shown her. A hidden root cellar beneath the floorboards concealed by a rug that had been there for decades. Outside, she could hear Marcus circling the cabin like a predator, testing the windows and doors. "I know you're in there, beautiful," he called out. "There's nowhere left to run." Amara found the hidden trapdoor and pulled it open, revealing a small, dark space that smelled of earth and age. She lowered herself into the cellar just as the front door exploded inward. From her hiding place, she could hear Marcus moving through the cabin above, his footsteps heavy on the old floorboards. Come out, wherever you are," he sang softly, his voice carrying a note of madness that made her blood run cold. She held her breath, pressing herself against the earthen wall, praying that he wouldn't find her hiding place. The storm continued to rage outside, but down here in the earth, surrounded by the bones of the house her grandmother had built with her own hands, Amara felt the first stirring of hope. Above her, Marcus's footsteps moved away toward the back rooms. In the distance, she could hear the sound of sirens, the fire department finally responding to the blaze at her cottage. Soon, there would be people, witnesses, help. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the storm clouds, Amara remained hidden in her grandmother's root cellar, alive and unbroken. The monster who had tried to destroy her was still somewhere above, but she had survived the longest night of her life. She had escaped the stranger in the rain, and she would live to see another day. When the police found Marcus 3 hours later, he was sitting in the cabin's main room, staring at the wall with vacant eyes. He offered no resistance when they arrested him, and he never spoke of the woman who had gotten away. Some said the storm had driven him mad, but Amara knew better. She had faced true evil and emerged victorious, carrying within her the strength of all the women who had come before her. The cottage could be rebuilt, the wounds would heal, but the courage she had discovered in that dark night would stay with her forever. The stranger had come seeking to destroy her, but instead, he had revealed the unbreakable spirit that lived within her beautiful, compassionate heart.